الحمد لله الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Today I'll begin with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in the Quran. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم السابقون السابقون. He talks about those that are the forerunners, the ones that are the forefront of all good. أولئك المقربون. They are the ones that are the closest. And we'll talk about this. في جنات النعيم. And they are in the gardens of delight. Now, Surah Al-Waqi', it's the 10th to the 12th ayah. When we recite it, we don't think about the meanings. Sabiqun are those that are racing ahead. Forerunner, the one that tries to get ahead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats it twice. Sabiqun as-sabiqun. Some people think that this is just the forerunners that are ahead of others. But then it would be mudaf ilay. And it's not. They're both ma'rifah here. Right? And that's a very deep thing to think about. Here, I'm not going to go into the i'rab so much, but this is actually, what I see, is the mubtada and khabar. And they're both marfu'. It's telling you about them. That when we talk about sabiqun, who are they? They are the sabiqun. Like if I tell you, you're the one. You say, me? And I say, yeah, you. Right? It's an emphasis that gets put on that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that they are the one that will be the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will be in the highest levels of Jannah, that will be closest to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will be in gardens of delight. Shaykh Abdul Rahman Nasir al-Sa'di, the Ustad of Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, he said, سابقون في الدنيا إلى الخير يعني إلى الخيرات. They are the ones that were the first to run towards good deeds. When there is a dars, those who go first and sit in the front and wait and be ready, those that when there is a need for sadaqah, they're the ones to donate first. When there is a need for jihad, they're the ones ready before anybody else. When there is a need to stand up for the deen, they are the ones that are ready to volunteer. They're not the ones being pushed. They're not the ones being dragged. They are the ones at the forefront that are like, I'm ready. You need it? I'm down. Like they're the ones that push forward. And you look in the life of the Sahaba, you will find them. So he said, they are the ones that push ahead in the khairat, in the good team. فَهُمْ سَابِقُونَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ لِلدُّخُولِ الْجَنَّاتِ. Then they are the first ones that will be running ahead and getting into Jannah first. Because in dunya, they pushed, they went forward, they were forerunners in good. Allah will make them ahead of everybody else in entering Al-Jannah. Many ai*imma and ulama explain these ayat in a very beautiful way. Well, what shahid min al-kalam, as we say, what is important from this speech for us is those Sahaba radiyallahu anhum that were the first, that were the earliest, that accepted this deen and sacrificed for this deen. They are the ones praised in these ayat. From them, the first to accept Islam, al-qawl al-rajih, the correct opinion. Now, in the last dars, we spoke about the first Shahida, the first martyr for Islam. Who was it? Sumayya radiallahu anha. Who was her husband? Yasir radiallahu. Her son? Ammar radiallahu anhu. The first one to give her life out of men and women. Like this is not a quota we're giving here, Like here we have in America, they're like, this is the first woman to do this. They don't just say it's the first to do it. And this is the first woman that went to space. They don't just say who's the first who went to space. We're not doing it that way. This is not affirmative action. The first, men, women, put everybody together. The first to give her life for Islam was a woman. Men, women, put together. The first to accept Islam, woman. Before any man. Before Ali radiallahu anhu, before Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, before Zayd ibn Harith radiallahu anhu, was Khadijah radiallahu anha. Sabiqa, and she was the first to run to accept the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obviously, there were Muslims in the previous nations, Ibrahim alayhi salam and Muhammad. I'm not saying the first in that sense. This sometimes the Christians, they try to play tricks, They will say Awwal, yani the first to accept, and they'll find an ayah where Ibrahim alayhi salam will say, I'm the first to accept. And they'll say, oh, he's the first, then how can somebody else be the first? No, every situation is different. For example, if I said the first student in the dars today was Abdurrahim, for example, right? That doesn't mean that there was no student that was ever first for any other dars in the past. No, the first to accept the risala of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and those would be different. But the first to accept the message of Islam from the risala of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa Khadijah radiyallahu anha. So no doubt these ayat, they praise those early Muslims. Al-Dhahabi, when I looked up, he wrote about her, just the introduction to her was so beautiful. He said, Khadija, al-Mu'mineen, the mother of the believers, Sayyida, the leader for Nisbat al-Alameen, the women, the leader of the women of all of the Alameen fi zamaniha. She was the leader of the women, of all of the women of her time. Look at that praise. Al-Qasim, she is the mother of Al-Qasim, and we'll talk about her children inshallah. Ibnat al-Khuwaylid, of the daughter of Khuwaylid, Ibn Asad, Ibn Abdul Uzza, Ibn al-Qusay, Ibn al-Kilab, al-Qurashiyya, al-Azdiyya. كانت عاقلة جليلة. What does he say about her? Al-Dhahabi, he says, he gives her lineage. She was the daughter of Khuwaylid, who was the son of Asad, who was the son of Abdul Uzza, who was the son of Qusay, who was the son of Kilab, and she is Qurashi, yani from the tribe of Quraysh, al-Azdiyya, from the subsection of Banu Asad. But then he says about her, كانت عاقلة, she was very intelligent. Jalila, yani dignified. Jalil, it's a hard word to translate. And this is the good point. I don't watch a lot of YouTube, to be honest. I watch some durus, some here and there, but like the drama, I don't waste my time with it. This guy said this about this person and this, the shock value stuff, waste of time. But I hear things. One of the things I heard that somebody online said, you should marry stupid women. Brother, die. You shouldn't marry intelligent women. You shouldn't. And a lot of sisters reacted to that. And then a lot of brothers, I don't know what they did, and stayed quiet at home. I don't know. But this is an incorrect statement. Islamically, the women of Islam, the ones that we praise, the one that we look up to, the one that we want our daughters and wives and sisters to be like, none of them were foolish. None of them lacked intellect. They were all intelligent. So you should marry intelligent women. What does it mean intelligent? It doesn't mean that they have PhDs or high IQ scores. Intelligent, that they know the religion and they know how to be a good wife and how to support her husband and how to build her household and how to raise her children and how to spread the religion within the limits that Allah has placed upon her. That is what an intelligent husband is, who knows the religion, who knows the huquq, who knows how to serve the religion without crossing the boundaries. This is what you should look for. And no doubt that the Salaf, the earlier generations, they would look to marry intelligent women. Khalid ibn Walid and others we've talked about how they would look, why they knew that would have an effect on their children. Now, sometimes you don't know. You marry somebody and then you're like, oh man, right? But you do your best. You look for a pious, intelligent, good-natured brother or sister. I mean, if a woman is marrying a man, she should look for those qualities in a man. And if a man is going to marry a woman, he should look for those qualities in a woman. Khadija radiallahu anha, she was married at a young age. And that was the riwaj, this is the tradition, the adat of the Quraysh, of the Arab of the time. We don't know exactly about her earlier marriages, and we'll talk about before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, some of the Rafidah, they have some strange opinions, because I read, and when I'm preparing these durus, I read a lot of different, these books are just for one masala. I go through a lot of books and I read some even weak opinion and stuff, because as a researcher, I have to read those and make sure that what I'm presenting to you is correct to the best of my abilities and ask Allah for forgiveness for my shortcomings. That's strange. They said, no, she was never married before. But then some of their own books talk about her earlier children, so I don't know how that works. So, no doubt that she was married, and we have Kutub al-Tarikh that talk about this. And her first husband, that was before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she had two husbands before. He is known as Abu Hala. But this is a kunya, Abu Hala. His own name, the majority of the ulama have come to say his name was Malik. Malik, and he was from Banu Tamim, at-Tamimi. He's most known as Abu Hala, but this is what we know about him. And she had children from him. We'll talk about her children in a minute. Then, some of the ulama said that he died. Allah knows best, because again, these are not very relevant to Islamic ulum, so we don't have like Rasulullah didn't tell us in a hadith or Allah in the Quran about him, so we go by historic reports that he died. And at that time, many of the men would die in wars, and they would go for trade, and the caravans would get raided, and other things like this. So after his death, she married a man named Atiq ibn A'id, and he was Makhzumi. Banu Makhzum, he was al-Makhzumi. Atiq also died according to the majority of the ulama, although there is an opinion that they were divorced, but what is correct is both of them died. From them, she had children, two of them that we can confirm for sure, right? And I've talked about this in other durus, I'm not going to go deep into this here, is Hind ibn Abu Hala or Ibn Abi Hala, and he is listed amongst the Sahaba. Yani after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's da'wah began, he accepted Islam. And there is Hind bint Atiq, and even though their name is spelled the same, because the word name Hind would be used for men and women amongst the Arab, but this is a daughter, and she is from the second husband, Atiq, and she's a Sahabiya as well. So as far as we can find in Kutub al-Tarikh, and you can check Al-Isaba of Ibn Hajar, Asqalani, both of them, they accepted Islam later on when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam message came. From Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she had 5 children. And this is what is authentic, what is correct. Yani, Al-Qasim being the eldest, Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad radiyallahu anhu, and he died as a child, and he also is known by some other names. Sometimes he's Tahir and Abdullah and so on. But what is correct is most of the ulama have said that these were names that he had. Zainab bint Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was also from Khadija radiyallahu anha. Al-Kalthum, Ruqayya, Fatima radiyallahu anhunna. These are all daughters from Khadija radiyallahu anha. In fact, all the children of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are from Khadija radiyallahu anha except Ibrahim. Ibrahim, he was born to Maria al-Qibtiyya. So, from the 6 children of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what we know is 5 of them were born to Khadija radiyallahu anha. What we also know from the khasa'is, from the special characteristics of Khadija radiyallahu anha, that as long as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was married to Khadija radiyallahu anha, he did not take a second wife. And at that time, he just kept one wife. After her death, he alayhi salatu wasalam, yes, he married other women, and each one of those marriages after the death of Khadija radiyallahu anha were for Islam, or for an Islamic reason for the religion. In the Seerah Durus that we've already completed, each marriage that we got to, I explained the reason for it. The Islamic reason, the benefit to the religion. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was young, we're talking about before his marriage to Khadija radiyallahu anha. Before he reached the age of 25, and when he was over 20, before 25, he was well known amongst the Quraysh for his honesty. And this is something very interesting. You know, people have habits, and habits very seldom change. Personalities change, circumstances change, habits are very hard to change. And that's why you should always be very careful about what you do. Because something you do constantly becomes a habit. And when it becomes a habit, it starts to become a part of your personality. So Be very careful of lying. Be very careful of the way you carry yourself, because sometimes that becomes a part of you. Always push yourself to good habits, to honesty, to bravery. If somebody is brave before Islam, they'll be brave in Islam. Khalid ibn Walid was brave before Islam, he was brave in Islam. Umar ibn Khattab was Umar before Islam, he was Umar in Islam. But Islam shined them. Islam gave them purpose. Islam gave them the nusrah of Allah. But those traits were there. Right? Somebody who's a coward, even if they become Muslim, very seldom have I seen that somebody suddenly just becomes like very brave. It could happen, but it's rare. Right? If somebody's bakhil, they're stingy, they could become Muslim, they'll still have that, even if they might be able to fight it off, to be able to be Islamically correct, but it's there, right? Khadija radiallahu anha, she was very honorable even before Islam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was known for his honesty before prophethood. And that is why when he brought the Risala, when he told the people about what happened with Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam, even the Quraysh said, we have never known him to lie. He is such an honest person that it was unfathomable that he's going to lie. His honesty and his honor and his good character was so famous that Khadija radiallahu anha, she was told by the people that you should hire him for your business. Her husbands had passed away, the two that we had talked about. She had their wealth, and she would send out carriages. She wouldn't go herself, and this is before Islam. She wouldn't go and be like, I'm going to get on that camel and I'm going to go and argue with people in the marketplace. No. She had that honor, that dignity. Many of the Sahaba, they had great qualities before Islam. Uthman radiyan, for example, he never did zina. He never drank alcohol. And Abu Bakr radiyan as well. And many of the Sahaba, they never worshipped an idol. Why? Because even before Islam, they saw this to be foolishness. Somebody asked one of the Sahabiyat that, did you ever commit zina before Islam? She said, how can a person who's free, who has the ability to choose, would do something like zina? So they had this honor. He said, Abu Bakr radiyan said that, how could somebody drink alcohol when I saw the people that they would be drunk and they would take feces and try to put it to their mouth. A drunk person doesn't know what they're doing. And the smell would hit them and they would put it away and then they would try to do it again. I'll tell you myself, when I was raised in America, I didn't know much about the religion. I never took a sip of alcohol. I never smoked a cigarette in my life. Why? I didn't see the point in it. I saw a friend of mine that was drunk, that peed on himself. I said, I'll never be like that. I never want to be that guy. Saw people smoking. I said, what does that? Gives you a headache, makes your teeth rot, gives you cancer. What's the point? Right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had these great qualities. And Khadija radiallahu anha, when she heard about this, she sent Maysara. Maysara was a slave that she owned to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who wasn't a prophet at this time. He was under the age of 25, and said, look, we have these caravans that we need to take goods and sell them, and you're an honest man. We'll work together. We'll split the profits. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted that. When he went, Maysara, he traveled with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when you travel with somebody, you get to know them really well. He saw his honesty. He saw his good character. He saw the way he dealt in a wonderful manner, the way he dealt with business. The Prophet came more than what they expected, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't try to take a cut from it. For example, if me and you agree that we're going to do a business, and you get half and I get half, and you say, well, how much do you expect? And I said, you should expect 5,000, and I'll expect 5,000, and I go and make 12,000. Now I could keep those 2,000 and you'd still be happy. Right? Because that's what I told you, 5,000. But from the bab, from the door of honesty, I would tell you, no, you know what, we made more profit. One of this, I get a lot of questions. About debts and payments and things. The strangest one I ever got was here at Masjid Ribat. Two brothers were fighting. They came to me and said, you have to make the hukam between us. I said, what's the issue? One said, I lent him money and he's giving it back more than what I lent him. I told him, what? The brother said, I lent him 6,000, he's giving me 7. said, what? I don't want to take riba. I told him, but why are you giving him 7? He goes, no, he lent me 7,000. It wasn't 6. I don't want to be held accountable in front of Allah. I said, subhanallah. How beautiful is that? Right? So when you have that bab of honesty, you have that taqwa. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made more profit and he gave it back. And he did something very intelligent. Again, Allah gives the people aql. Instead of just taking the goods and selling them, the Arab, what they would do is they would do 2 routes. They would go to Sham, they would take their goods and sell them in Sham, in the land that is currently Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, in this area. And they would go there in the summer. This was a cool area. And then they would do a separate business trip to Yemen in the winter, because winter was hotter. So they would go to Yemen and they would sell. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he did is that he took goods to Sham, but then he bought goods from Sham and brought them back. I mean, this was a very intelligent move. Instead of just coming back empty-handed, say, there's things that we'll sell in Makkah, we'll bring those back. And he didn't try to do it underhandedly. He didn't do it, okay, her deal with me was just to sell, this other stuff is my own. No. He told her, look, I'll split that profit as well. So she was impressed. Look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was handsome. No doubt to that. Look at any kitab that mentions the shama'il or the characteristics about Rasulullah, who was very handsome. But that's not what attracted Khadija radiyallahu anha. It was not that he was, just that she saw him and she fell in love. Out of this weird Hollywood ideas that they have. I just saw him. I fell in love. It could be some alcoholic, rapist, murderer. What are you falling in love with? And then when he gets a little bit older and gets more handsome with gray. No, I'm just kidding. His hair starts turning gray and teeth start up. Now you're not going to love him anymore? The same thing with women. We don't marry women because I saw her in a bikini. No. Because someday she's not going to have that body. What are you going to do? Divorce her then? No, we marry for the sake of Allah. Yes, there should be some attraction, but that's not the reason. Khadija radiyallahu anha, she was impressed with the akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the honesty of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the very important point that I want to make. People think, oh, I know this guy. Until you've either traveled with him, or you've been a neighbor to him, did business with them, you don't really know them, to be honest. And there's a beautiful hadith that Imam al-Bayhaqi has mentioned in the Sunan al-Kabir, and the hadith is sahih. I checked the sanad today. It's an authentic hadith, where a man came in front of Umar radiallahu anhu and said, I want to bear testimony, I want to give my witness. Umar radiallahu anhu said, I don't know you. You're not from here. I don't know you. How can I take your testimony about an issue when I don't know you? You could be truthful, I don't know. You could be lying, I don't know. So man said, I'll bring somebody to testify to my character. He said, okay. So man brought somebody. The man said, تعرف قال عمر تعرفه, do you know him? فقال نعم. بعدل, I know him with justice والفضل and good character. فقال عمر فهو جارك, is he your neighbor that تعرفه ليل والنهار, that you would know night and day? فقال لا. He said no. He said okay. He said, is he somebody that you have mu'amalat with? The mu'amalat بالدينار والدرهم, with money. Dinar, dinar is Islamic gold coin, and dirham is a silver coin. That you know his wara', that you know his carefulness with how he does business and honesty. فقال لا. He said no. He said طيب. He said, did you go with him for safar? Have you traveled with him that you would know about his makarim al-akhlaq, about his good mannerisms in traveling? He said no. فقال عمر ليست تعرفه, you don't know him. لست, you do not. تعرفه, don't know him. It's wisdom. So Maysara, when he traveled with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Khadija radiyallahu, when the business dealings were done with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they got to know the true honesty and great character of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here, an idea came to her from those around her that why don't you marry this man? Now, one of the misconceptions we have in the ummah today is that Khadija radiallahu anha was 40 years of age when she married Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was of 25 years of age. Most of you know that's not true because most of you were in the Sirah Durus, but I remember when I first taught this mas'ala and I explained this in the Sirah Durus, I had this uprising against me in the masjid here. I remember that day I finished and there were brothers, they weren't like, but they were like, brother, are you sure? I read it in Rahiq al-Makhdum. I know, I read it there too, but it's not right, since I was a child I've heard this. I know, Shaykh Fulan said it. I know, but we judge things by Asani. And this is why I brought this stack again today, just in case y'all can check it out yourself, right? Because I don't speak from my own ideas. Now, this is from books. I don't have that library as a backdrop for videos. That's my library. That's where I read. So this is a misconception. We'll talk about that, but that's not the point I'm making here. The point I'm making here is she was young. Between 25 and 28 years of age. So still relatively young. And before that, as we say, Ibn Sa'ad says in his Tabaqat, that many people, after the death of Atiq, many people proposed to her and she turned down those proposals because she didn't find anybody there that was to fit her character, morally. So at that time, she could have married anybody. She was from the best lineage. She was from a honored lineage in the Quraysh. And she was rich. She was wealthy on her own. She didn't need a husband. She had money. She had her own business. And was doing great. She was well respected amongst the Quraysh. She was honored. Nobody doubted her character or her honor. So she could have easily just stayed single. But she saw that a woman needs a husband. Not for money, not for society, but this is a part of how men and women are supposed to live. Men aren't supposed to live single. This Catholic's idea and all that, this is not Islamic idea. And we see the evils that come out of it. And women aren't supposed to live single. And we see the evils that come out of that. Men and women are supposed to be married. And if one doesn't work out, marry another. And this is a Hindu concept, or maybe a Catholic concept that has come into our ummah, that there's no such thing as divorce, and there's no such thing as getting married after divorce. Yes, divorce is a horrible thing, you shouldn't go towards it, but if it happens, it doesn't mean the rest of your life you're just going to be like, I'm not getting married. No. In Islam, you get married. And the Sahaba were like that. Many of them, husband died, woman married somebody else. Woman died, the husband married somebody else. They got divorced, they married other people. So, Khadija radiallahu anha, she didn't need a husband in that sense of financial stability or anything, but when she saw somebody of that good moral character, she wanted to now send a proposal. That's something very strange now to imagine a woman sending a proposal. It's very difficult. And the Arab of that time and everything. So the way she did it, she sent a woman named Nafisa. And the details I've gone over the Sirah Daras, that's not really the point here, but I'm going to go over a little bit. And she came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she didn't. This is an incorrect idea in a lot of books as well, that they think as if she just came and she said, oh, there's glad tidings, No. She was also very intelligent. She came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she said, oh, Muhammad, he's not a messenger, he's not given nabuwa at this time. Obviously, he's a messenger in the sense that Allah wrote his nabuwa before he was even born. But the Risala has not begun yet. Quran has not been revealed to him yet. So he tells him, why don't you get married? You're young, around 25 years of age. You're honest, you're trustworthy. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, yes, it's a good idea, but how do I find a woman of honor and dignity? And again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not wealthy. Because again, we talked about his background, Abu Talib, and the number of children and all of that, and the struggles that we're going through financially. He was working for Khadija radiallahu anha, but obviously every man wants to get married at that age anyway. He says, would you suggest somebody? Nafisa said, why don't you marry Khadija? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, she is somebody of honor and she's wealthier than me and well known. Would she marry somebody like me? And Nafisa told her, I'll take care of it. I'll help you out. And that's the intelligence of women here, mashallah, She didn't come and say, oh yeah, she told me. No, she said, I'll hook you up. Don't worry about it. And I'll do you a favor. She already knew that Khadija radiallahu anha had wanted to this proposal to go forward. So then the talk of marriage began, and the father of Khadija radiallahu anha had passed away. And it is not from even the tradition of the Arab from the past that an honorable woman would just come and be like, yeah, I accept, So instead, it went to the elders. And Amr ibn Asad, who is Khuwaylid's brother, so her uncle, he is the one that accepted on her behalf. And Abu Talib, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was the one that represented the family on his behalf. And they got married. Regarding the mehr of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is khilaf of ulama, a lot of discussion. Many said 40 dirham, some said 12 camels, some gave different numbers, but it was light. It was not something heavy. It was not something that would be overburdening. Now we get to the issue of the age of Khadija radiallahu anha at the time of her marriage. And this is something again, commonly, Al-Mubarak Puri and Al-Rahiq and most books that we read today in English, if you look at Karen Armstrong, non-Muslims or others, they will put 40. And many speakers in their videos, they'll make a big deal, like she was 40 and he was 25 and look at this. And people love to quote this and so on, but this is not correct. This is a book that I've brought, Sirah Nabiyya Sahiha of Dr. Akram al-Amri. Very excellent book if you want to look at the authenticity of things from the Sirah. And he discusses this issue, bringing the aqwal of the ulama of the past about the age of Khadija radiallahu anha. He mentioned that Ibn Ishaq, the famous scholar of Tariq, he said that she was 28 years of age. And he said that those narrations that mention her to be 40 are reported by Al-Waqidi. All of the narrations that they go back to discuss the age of Khadija radiallahu anha being 40, these are from Al-Waqidi. Al-Waqidi is matruk in hadith. He's not just da'if, he's rejected in hadith. So those narrations are extremely weak. And then he mentions some other opinions and things that are mentioned by Ibn Ishaq. And other evidences that show that at the age of her death, she was 50. Remember that, age of death 50. This is Al-Isaba of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, standard book, I'm sure all of you guys know about it. And he mentions here the marriage of Khadija radiallahu anha. فكان تزوج نبي عليه الصلاة والسلام خديجة, and she was 25 sana. She was 25 years of age. This is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani and Al-Isaba. Rahiq al-Makhtum, the standard book that studied, a really excellent book by Al-Mubarak Puri, wonderful book, but it does mention the age of Khadija radiallahu anha to be 40, and that is a mistake based on a matruk hadith. There is an excellent taliq. I mean, this is a book that is written as a commentary or on that book itself. And here it mentions as well from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma that her age was 28 or around that age, and this is mentioned by Ibn Asakir. Okay? The last of the books that I brought here is Bidayah wa Nihaya. Ibn Kathir's famous Bidayah wa Nihaya. That's a standard that is studied. When I first mentioned this, by the way, in the early durus, I was in shock myself because I had never heard this. When I was going to teach this, I read these things, I go through these books, and I was like, man, am I tripping? Like, am I in it? Because everybody, so I called one of my shuyukh and I told him, Shaykh, I saw this. He told me, no, you're wrong. I told him, Shaykh, I'm telling you, I read it. He said, where do you? I told him, Bidayah wa Nihaya. He looked it up, and then he called me back. He said, Subhanallah, you're right. And he goes, I've taught Bidayah wa Nihaya, and I never thought about this. So, this is something mentioned. So, in Bidayah wa Nihaya, he mentions here, Ibn Kathir, بلغت خديجة رضي عنها 65 سنة, that there is an opinion that she was 65 years of age at death. Now this is the narration from Waqidi. Now if she was 65 and we know she died 10 years after the Nabuwah, after prophethood. Okay? So if she was 65, then at the time of prophethood, how old would she be? 55. And we know that Rasulullah became a prophet at the age of 40, and he married her at 25. So that means at the time of her marriage, he would have been 25, and that would have been 15 years before prophethood, that means she would have been 40. 15 minus 55. But this is the narration from Waqidi. This is the Matrugna. Then Ibn Kathir says, and it is said, 50 sana, that she was 50 at the time of death, and he says, فَهُوَ أَصَاحٌ. And that is the correct opinion, as Ibn Kathir says in Bidayah wa Nihayah. So if she was 50 at death, and that was 10 years after Nabuwah, then how old was she when Rasulullah became a prophet? 40. And we know that Nabuwah was 15 years after their marriage, from the fact that he was 25 and 40 at the time of Nabuwah. That means at the time of her marriage, how old was she? 25. So if we look at these narrations from Ibn Abbas, Ibn Ishaq, and others that we mentioned here, she was between 25 and 28. We may not know exactly, Wallahu a'lam. But she was close to the age of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was not 15, 20 years older. This is unfortunate. Again, personally, it doesn't matter to me. If you're 20 and you want to marry a 40-year-old woman, go for it. Nothing wrong in the Sharia. If you're a 40-year-old guy and you want to marry a 20-year-old woman, marry her. Nothing wrong in the Sharia. But academic honesty is important to know what is correct, what is authentic, and what is not. All these seerah durus across the world, and they're teaching this, knowing it's a matruk narration, is not acceptable to me. Khair. Khadijah radiallahu anha, she married Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and she bore children to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And that's another evidence as well. If she was 40, and then she had 5 children, and the children were not one after the other, we know their birth dates were, some of them had 2 years and 2+ years between them. That means she would have had to be having children past the age of 50, which is very uncommon. I'm not saying impossible, but it's very uncommon for a woman past the age of 50 to be giving birth. And we know from the Arab, from the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, that this was not known amongst the Arab, for a woman to even have haid past 50, let alone be having children. Even in America, if women have children after 40, doctors are worried about this. Very, very seldom, shad wal nadir, that a woman at 50 would have children. And if that was true, then we would have found that in the books of Tariq, that she was so old that she had children. If it was miraculous, like Ishaq radiallahu alayhi salam, like him, Sarah radiallahu having him at a very old age, then this would have been listed amongst the miracles, and it wasn't. So that's another. But again, we have the clear evidences. She had children with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they had a very happy marriage. Obviously, every marriage will have ups and downs. I'm not saying, but from what we know of Tariq, they had a happy marriage, and she was very supportive of him, and he was honest in his dealings. Now a time came that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dedicated himself to ibadah. He felt this need to isolate himself. So what he would do, alayhi salatu wasalam, he would leave the house and leave the family and leave the children, and he would go up to the ghar, to the cave, to just worship alone. So he would leave and sit there and just worship Allah and face, and if you've been up there, you can see the Kaaba from there. So he could see the Kaaba and he could see Makkah, but he was alone and he would worship for days on end. Khadijah radiallahu anha didn't say, "Where are you at? How come you're not in the house? Who are you going to go up see on that cave? Who's up there? What's her name?" No, instead she would send Maysara, her slave, with food and things to go and deliver to him to make sure that he was comfortable. This is important. My brothers and sisters in Islam, many women today, they will say to the brothers, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to help around the house. You know that, right? Like, okay, that's true. But how were his wives too? How was Aisha radiallahu anha? How was Khadija radiallahu anha? Look at that. Don't look at the opposite. You should look at how were the wives. If you're a sister, look at how the wives were. The brothers, you should look at how the husband should be. And that will make that balance. And we need to know their lives, how they acted. How beautiful was that balance. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would spend days at end out there. And at one time, he spent longer than usual. And Khadija radiallahu anha was worried. So she sent her servant out to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And inshallah next Saturday, we'll talk about what happened next.